How Carl Jung's wisdom will make you unstoppable. Nothing will affect you. There's a moment in every person's life when they begin to sense that there's something deeper behind the curtain of everyday experience. Maybe it's a feeling that your life is being subtly guided by forces you don't fully understand. Maybe it's a pattern you keep falling into, even though you swear you've moved past it. Or maybe it's an overwhelming sense of being stuck. Like you're living a version of yourself that isn't really you. This is where Carl Jung enters the room, not just as a psychologist, but as a guide into the depths of your soul. And what he teaches doesn't just help you survive life, it makes you unstoppable. Because once you understand the hidden architecture of the self, nothing can affect you in the same way again. Now, let me ask you something. When you look in the mirror, who do you see? Is it just your face, or is it a constructed identity built from years of experiences, societal expectations, fear, and maybe even trauma? Jung called this version of ourselves the persona, the mask we wear to navigate the world. But here's the uncomfortable truth. The persona is not you. It's a compromise. It's a performance. And the more we invest in protecting it, the more disconnected we become from the real self that lies beneath.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more topics you love.
That real self. Jung called it the self with a capital S. It's not just your conscious mind. It's the totality of who you are, your light and your shadow, your reason and your madness, your dreams and your instincts. Most of us never meet this deeper self because we're terrified of what we might find. But here's the twist. The very things we fear in ourselves, the anger, the sadness, the vulnerability, are the keys to our power. When we repress them, they control us from the shadows. But when we integrate them, they become fuel. That's why Jung said, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. Now pause and let that hit you. Real growth doesn't come from just thinking positive. It comes from confronting the very things you're running from. That anxiety you feel, that recurring failure, that relationship that keeps triggering you. Those aren't accidents. Those are messages and clues, invitations from the unconscious mind, asking you to pay attention. Because here's the secret Jung understood: until you make the unconscious conscious, it will rule your life and you will call it fate. Think about that for a second. What if the very circumstances you blame, your job, your partner, your past, aren't the problem? What if the real issue is that you haven't looked inward deeply enough to see the internal patterns that are attracting those external experiences? And what if, instead of avoiding the hard stuff, you leaned in? You started to explore your own inner world with the same energy you use to chase success or avoid pain. I've been there. I've had moments where I felt completely derailed, lost, anxious, angry at the world. And it's easy to blame the world when everything feels out of control. But then I remembered Jung's concept of individuation. This is the process of becoming whole, not by becoming someone else, but by becoming yourself, fully, authentically, without apology. It means integrating the parts you love and the parts you hate. And once you do that, something incredible happens. The world stops having so much power over you. People's opinions don't shake you. Failures don't destroy you. Because you're not living to prove anything. You're living in alignment with your deepest truth. But this isn't easy. Jung never pretended that it was. In fact, He believed that the path to wholeness is often marked by crisis. That's why he explored the archetype of the hero not just as a mythical figure, but as a symbol of the individual who dares to descend into the unknown, but confront their inner demons and return with wisdom. Sound familiar? It should, because this isn't just myth, it's your story too. Every time you face something terrifying within yourself and come out the other side, you are enacting the hero's journey. And that's what makes you unstoppable. Not perfection, not control, not certainty, but the courage to face your inner chaos. To stop numbing it, stop avoiding it, stop pretending it doesn't exist, and start listening to what it has to teach you. Because your shadow is not your enemy. It's your teacher. And once you understand this, nothing can affect you the same way again. Not rejection, not loss, not fear. Because you know that everything happening on the outside is just a reflection of what's inside. And if you can transform what's inside, you change the entire game. The shadow is the key. How embracing your dark side will set you free. Let's not sugarcoat this. This part of the journey is uncomfortable. It's raw. It's not something you post on social media with a neat filter and a motivational caption. This is the inner terrain that most people avoid their entire lives. And yet, Carl Jung believed it was the most essential part of becoming a whole, powerful human being. He called it shadow work. And once you understand what that really means, you'll see why it's the key to unlocking a version of yourself that is truly unstoppable. The shadow, according to Jung, is everything you've disowned in yourself. It's not just the evil or bad parts, it's also your hidden strength, your untapped anger, your denied brilliance, your suppressed instincts. It's the parts of you that, somewhere along the line, you were taught not to show. Maybe you were told not to cry, not to be angry, not to speak too loudly, not to dream too big. And so those parts got pushed down into the unconscious, where they started acting out in ways you can't always see, through self-sabotage, through projection, and through addiction, through anxiety. Now let me hit you with a question that could change everything. What if the thing you're most ashamed of is actually the source of your power? That rage you try to suppress? It could be the fuel you need to finally stand up for yourself. That fear you hide behind a smile. It might be your greatest compass, pointing you toward your purpose. The problem isn't that you have darkness, the problem is that you haven't learned how to use it. Jung didn't ask us to eliminate the shadow. He asked us to confront it, understand it, and integrate it. And that process takes guts. It means being honest with yourself when it's easier to pretend. It means owning your flaws without turning them into excuses. And it means recognizing that every time you point a finger at someone else, you might be projecting something unresolved in yourself. You've seen it in others, people who criticize loudly, who obsess over control, who can't stop judging the world. But can you see it in yourself? Can you trace that judgment back to a wound you haven't healed? Jung said, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. That's next-level self-awareness. That's real power. I'll be honest, doing shadow work for the first time felt like stepping into a fire. There were things I didn't want to admit, parts of me I had carefully hidden behind ambition, positivity, and achievement. But when I finally faced those parts, something unexpected happened. I started to relax. I stopped trying so hard to be someone. I realized I didn't need to constantly prove or perform. I was finally giving myself permission to be whole, not just the good parts, but all of it. And here's the wild part: the more I accepted my darkness, the less it controlled me. The fear didn't disappear, but it stopped running the show. The anger didn't vanish, but I learned how to channel it into courage. That's the paradox of the shadow. The moment you stop resisting it, it transforms from a demon into an ally. So how do you actually do this? How do you begin to integrate your shadow? First, you get curious. You start noticing your emotional reactions, especially the ones that feel disproportionate. When something or someone triggers you deeply, ask, what part of me is being threatened? What belief is being challenged? That's where the shadow lives. It's not logical, it's emotional. It shows up when your identity feels under attack. Second, you stop moralizing your emotions. There is no such thing as a bad feeling. Every emotion has a message. Shame is trying to protect you from rejection. Anger is trying to show you where your boundaries are being crossed. Even envy is showing you what you secretly desire. The trick is to listen without immediately reacting. Third, you begin to express what's been repressed. That might mean journaling, it might mean art, but it might mean having uncomfortable conversations. But the goal is not to get rid of the shadow, it's to bring it into the light. Because what you can see, you can transform. What stays hidden stays in control. And once you start doing this work, you'll notice something incredible. You become less reactive, less fragile, less dependent on other people's validation. Because you've met the parts of yourself that used to scare you, and now nothing out there holds power over you. The monsters are no longer hiding in the dark. You've looked them in the eyes. You've made peace with them. So ask yourself, what am I refusing to see in myself? What would happen if I stopped being afraid of my darkness and started learning from it? In the next part, we'll explore something even deeper, the idea that your greatest suffering might be the doorway to your destiny. We'll unpack Jung's insight that meaning, not happiness, is what makes life bearable and extraordinary. Suffering into strength, how turning pain into meaning makes you unstoppable. We live in a world obsessed with avoiding pain. We're taught to seek comfort, pleasure, distraction, anything but discomfort. Scroll away your anxiety. Buy your way out of emptiness. Medicate sadness. Escape. But Carl Jung saw something most people miss entirely. Pain is not the enemy. In fact, it's one of the most profound sources of transformation. And pain, when faced with courage and awareness, becomes the very fuel that makes you unstoppable. Because suffering without meaning breaks you. But suffering with meaning, that reshapes you into something fierce, something whole, something real. Jung believed that the deepest wounds we carry are often the portals to our highest potential. And this isn't just poetic, it's brutally, beautifully true. When we're hurt, when we're betrayed, when we fail, something breaks open inside us. And in that breaking, there's a rawness, a kind of radical honesty that we almost never allow ourselves otherwise. Have you ever noticed how clear things get in your most painful moments? How illusions shatter? But that's not an accident. That's your soul clearing out what no longer serves. Let me share something personal. There was a time in my life when I felt like I had lost everything that gave me identity, projects that failed, relationships that ended, a sense of purpose that crumbled overnight. It felt like standing in the middle of a collapsed building, nothing left but dust. And in that dust, I started asking questions I had avoided for years. Who am I if I'm not succeeding? Who am I if I'm not being praised? What part of me have I been ignoring just to keep moving? Jung calls this the dark night of the soul. It's the moment when the ego, the story you've been telling yourself, no longer works. And it's terrifying, but it's also sacred, because the ego needs to break in order for the true self to emerge. This is where individuation begins in earnest. But when everything falls apart, you finally stop pretending. And what you discover underneath the performance is something unshakable, a self forged not in comfort, but in fire. So ask yourself, what has your suffering taught you that nothing else could? We don't like to think of pain as a teacher, but it is. Pain humbles us. It makes us human. It strips away the surface layers and forces us to see what's underneath. And the deeper you're willing to look, the more you find meaning. That's the difference between someone who's bitter and someone who's wise. They've both been through hell, but one refused to listen, while the other asked, "Why is this happening for me?" Instead of "Why is this happening to me?" Jung was adamant about this. Happiness isn't the goal of life, meaning is. Good meaning doesn't always feel good. In fact, it often hurts. But it's the kind of hurt that cleans you out. That makes room for something greater. The wounds become sacred not because they're beautiful, but because they made you deeper, more aware, more compassionate, more awake. Let's take this into the practical realm. When you're in pain, the instinct is to numb it. But what if you did something else? What if you got curious instead? What if you sat with your sadness not to wallow, but to listen? What does it want you to know? What lie have you been telling yourself that this pain is exposing? What truth have you been avoiding that this suffering is now demanding you face? Jung once said, "In all chaos there is a cosmos, in all disorder a secret order." Your suffering isn't random. It's trying to wake you up, to realign you with your deeper path. But you have to be brave enough to look, and brave enough to let go of the life you thought you were supposed to live in order to step into the one that's actually yours. This is where you become unstoppable, because the world can take things from you. People can hurt you. Life will disappoint you. But when you know how to extract meaning from every experience, especially the painful ones, you become unbreakable. You don't just survive life, you transmute it. You alchemize the dark into light, the wound into wisdom, the setback into power. Imagine living that way, where every challenge is an initiation. Every pain is a signal. Every moment is meaningful, even the messy ones. That's not just resilience, that's transformation. And it doesn't come from pretending everything's okay. It comes from knowing that even when it's not okay, you're still growing, still becoming, still reaching for the self that Jung knew lived beneath all the chaos. So I'll ask you this, and I want you to really sit with it. What if your deepest pain is the path to your greatest self? What if nothing needs to be avoided, but everything needs to be understood? Becoming the self, how living from your deepest truth makes you untouchable. This is it, the final stage of our journey through Jung's wisdom. And now, it's time to understand what it all leads to. The dismantling of the persona, the confrontation with the shadow, the transmutation of suffering, it's all been pointing in one direction, the realization of the self. And once you begin to live from this place, you're whole, integrated, true center, you become untouchable. Not because life stops challenging you, but because nothing external can shake the inner foundation you've built. Carl Jung didn't believe in perfection. He didn't preach that we should ascend beyond pain or become enlightened beings floating above the mess of human life. No, he believed in wholeness. And wholeness is gritty, raw, human. It's not about being flawless. It's about being real, fully, consciously, authentically yourself. The self, as Jung defined it, is the totality of your psyche, the union of conscious and unconscious, light and dark, known and unknown. When you live from the self, you stop being reactive. You stop being dominated by insecurity, by fear, by ego-driven approval-seeking. You move differently in the world, more calmly, more grounded, more free. And the best part, you stop needing life to go your way. You no longer seek constant reassurance because your sense of value doesn't come from outside. You've integrated your shadow, faced your wounds, dropped the masks. There's no one left to impress, no image to maintain. You're just you, real, raw, evolving and unshakably rooted in your own being. Let's get brutally honest, most people are exhausted not by life, but by the roles they're playing. Pretending to be fine, pretending to be in control, pretending to be who they think others want them to be. But that performance costs energy. It splits the psyche, and deep down, it creates a quiet kind of suffering, a sense of disconnection from who we truly are. Jung's work is the antidote to that. He invites us back to ourselves, not the curated self, not the social self, but the inner self, the one that's always been there, waiting patiently beneath the noise. Living from the self isn't abstract. It's incredibly practical. It looks like saying no to things that drain your soul. It looks like pursuing work that aligns with your values instead of your fears. It means choosing relationships where you can be fully seen, not just admired. And it means trusting your inner voice even when it doesn't make sense to the world. Because that voice, the quiet one beneath the chatter, that's the self speaking. And here's what's really wild. Once you start living from the self, life begins to reorganize around you. Not because you're manifesting some magical destiny, but because your energy changes. You attract what aligns. You stop chasing things that aren't meant for you. You create, you contribute, you express from the place of truth. That's unstoppable. Not in a loud, flashy way, but in a way that's solid, peaceful, clear. You've probably felt glimpses of this before. Maybe in a moment of deep honesty with yourself. Maybe when you were creating something and lost track of time. Maybe when you were in nature and everything just made sense for a second. Those aren't coincidences. Those are reminders of who you really are. So I leave you with one final question, maybe the most important one of all. What would your life look like if you stopped trying to be someone and finally allowed yourself to become who you truly are? This is the promise of Jung's wisdom, not a life without struggle, but a life of deep meaning. Not freedom from challenges, but freedom within them. A life where nothing external defines you and no setback diminishes you. A life where you walk the world as your whole self integrated, awake, and unshakably rooted in your inner truth. And once you taste that, nothing will affect you the same way again. That's the power of Carl Jung's legacy. And that's how his wisdom will make you unstoppable.